Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating shift in global politics, the strategic use of an unapologetic, highly visible persona in modern statecraft. We're looking at what analysts are calling the Meloni method. It's literally a masterclass in how a carefully cultivated public identity is doing some heavy lifting on the international stage, and honestly, it's reshaping how we, the public, perceive global power. So let's dive right into this by asking a surprisingly deep question. How exactly did a viral selfie redefine statecraft? I know, it sounds like a massive exaggeration, but the source material points to a very specific, fascinating moment from May 19th that perfectly captures how global diplomacy is changing right before our eyes. Picture the scene. Two world leaders, the prime ministers of Italy and India, Giorgia Meloni and Narendra Modi, standing there grinning at a smartphone camera. The ancient Colosseum is lit up spectacularly right behind them. And earlier that evening, they were literally bonding over a packet of Indian Melodi toffees, a clever little pun on their combined names. What cut through the usual diplomatic noise here wasn't some dense policy. It was the ease of it all. It was just entirely unforced theater. And the caption she posted alongside that picture? Highly calculated. "Welcome to Rome, my friend." Notice the exclamation mark there. As the analysis points out, that wasn't just social media fluff. That punctuation mark was performing real diplomatic work. In an era of stiff, heavily choreographed protocol, using a personal register like this signals genuine warmth to audiences in both countries. It actually makes the diplomacy feel human, and frankly, it completely shifts how we, as everyday observers, connect with geopolitical news.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that this warmth isn't just for show. It leads to hard, tangible outcomes. Literally the very next day, their governments announced a massive €20 billion bilateral trade target by 2029, alongside major discussions on defense and strategic partnerships. That unforced theatricality, the dinner, the toffees, it made these formal outcomes resonate so much more strongly with the public.
Which brings us to Section 1, a woman from Garbatella, looking at the roots of this radical self-presentation.
To really understand her unapologetic brand, we have to look at her origins. Born in 1977, she was raised in a working-class neighborhood in central Rome called Garbatella by a single mother. There's absolutely no elite university or fancy finishing school background here. Instead, she immersed herself in politics incredibly early, joining the Italian social movement at just 15. By 21, she wins her first local election, and by 31, she's Italy's youngest minister. Then in 2012, she co-founded her current party, Brothers of Italy.
Now, the electoral payoff of this outsider approach was just seismic. Her party, Brothers of Italy, skyrocketed from a marginal 4% vote share in 2018 to over 26% in 2022. That stunning rise is one of the most dramatic leaps in modern Italian history, and it's exactly what made her Italy's first female prime minister.
The ideological foundation of that rise is captured perfectly in her famous 2019 Rome rally speech. She declared, "I am Georgia. I am a woman. I am a mother. I am Italian. I am Christian. And you can't take that away from me." The sources note this is the defining thesis of her public persona. It's this loud, specific, and radical refusal to disappear into the gray, muted language of typical political technocracy.
Moving on to Section 2, Statecraft in the Visual Age, and how formal outcomes stem from personal signals.
Let's look at how she applies this distinct identity on the global stage. Consider her dynamic with French President Emmanuel Macron. On one side, you have a centrist technocrat with a highly elite background. On the other, a right-wing populist with working-class nationalist roots. Their dynamic is so calculated and honestly fascinating to watch because it essentially sets two entirely different models of leadership against each other. Now, as you might guess, that contrast initially led to some severe tensions. We're talking deep disagreements over migration and fierce disputes over reproductive rights language at the 2024 G7 summit. There was even a famously awkward embrace at the Élysée Palace. Yet by the June 2025 Turning Point Summit and the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis, they managed to achieve a carefully calibrated cooperation. She aligned with France on maritime security, but she imposed very clear limits to protect Italian strategic autonomy. It really shows that her flamboyance absolutely does not lack strategic restraint or calculation. Furthermore, she's managed to make herself indispensable across completely different political camps. Just think about this meeting from May 2025, a trilateral sit-down in Rome with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Vance publicly praised her as a bridge builder between Washington and Brussels, Actually, the genius here is that she can be exactly herself whether she's in the Oval Office, in Paris, or at the Colosseum. That consistency is the very foundation of her appeal.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit for Section 3, redefining women in power and rejecting the quiet technocrat.
Because Meloni is not an isolated case. She's actually part of a much broader global trend of female leaders who are completely rejecting historical expectations. Across the entire political spectrum, these women have effectively deployed visibility as a powerful instrument. You have Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand using emotional clarity, Sanna Marin in Finland refusing to suppress her vibrant personality, Sanna Takaichi in Japan projecting unapologetic ideological assertiveness, and Yulia Tymoshenko in Ukraine using her visual presentation as a literal political identity. Historically, female leaders were pressured to be restrained, cautious, and kind of neutrally muted. But this new generation, they deploy theatrality and presence as absolute power.
That brings us to Section 4, the limits of the argument, where we need to objectively acknowledge the controversies.
To fully understand this explainer impartially, it's absolutely crucial we acknowledge the significant controversies surrounding her specific politics. Critics heavily point out that her party, Brothers of Italy, traces its roots to a post-fascist movement. Additionally, her immigration policies face intense criticism from human rights organizations, and her stances on LGBTQ rights and reproductive freedoms remain deeply contentious globally. Understanding the Meloni method means seeing how she uses that highly visible persona to navigate and counter these very criticisms. So bringing it all together, this is the Meloni method, the ability to project a compelling, visible, and confident presence as a genuine political skill in modern leadership. The big takeaway here is that projecting a highly visible, authentically human presence, whether you're laughing over toffees or navigating incredibly complex defense summits, is now a potent, highly effective geopolitical tool. It's really about making diplomacy feel human.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. In an age of hypervisual politics, is being entirely, loudly, and unmistakably oneself the ultimate geopolitical advantage? Think about it. In a world that spent decades asking female leaders to be quieter, flatter, safer, and much less visible, has unapologetic authenticity actually become the new standard for global influence? It's a fascinating shift in how power is projected today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it gave you a brilliant new lens to view the world stage.